So what the question is, it's difficult to understand how refraining from chametz for an entire week helps to defeat the Yetzer Hara the entire year, right? You eat chametz all year long, right? So the connection to the Yetzer Hara should return, right? You only have a week that you're out without chametz. So why is Pesach the time to fight our Yetzer Hara? When would you want to fight the Yetzer Hara? We're talking about Aseres Mei Tshuva. That's the time to fight the Yetzer Hara. It's much more appropriate. So it's brought down. I heard this from Rav Yehuda Zweig, one of the Rosh Yeshiva in Miami, Rosh Yeshivas in Miami Beach, the Rosh Yeshiva's son. He says like this: the Torah tells us, "Vayar Elokim es kol asher asa v'hinei tov mod." And Hashem saw that everything that He created was very good. And the Midrash explains that means He created the Yetzer Hara, right? Without which no one would be able to build or plant anything. The Yetzer Hara is defined as what? As the drive to serve oneself. If you try to fight the Yetzer Hara by sublimating and negating our desires to serve ourselves, we will ultimately fail because, in essence, we'd be fighting ourselves. Meaning the Yetzer Hara is something the Torah calls good, right? The correct approach is to internalize that serving Hashem is the best thing we can do for ourselves, that use the Yetzer Hara to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is something else I heard from the Rosh Yeshiva many, many years ago. It's the idea is that Hashem says to us, Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin. I created the Yetzer Hara. I created the Torah as a Tavlin. What is a Tavlin? It's spice. Spices don't overpower and destroy a taste. It enhances, unless it's yeshiva food, as we used to joke, right? Then you need as much spice as possible, right? Our key spice for the Ashkenazim in yeshiva was mayonnaise. And for the South Americans and the Sephardim, it was like charif and 10 other things to drown out all the food. But in general, you have spice. It's something you have to use in a subtle way to enhance. So Torah is doing what? Not knocking off the Yetzer Hara. It is enhancing the Yetzer Hara. That for the Yetzer Hara is a tov. It's a great thing. It's your inclinations. It's your drive and your desire. Without that, you wouldn't want to accomplish anything. You wouldn't want to sweat in order to earn money or build things or family. Who in their right mind? We want to have a wife and children.
But what doesn't it say at the same time that the Hashem? It says in the Gemara, Hashem regretted creating Yetzer Hara.
I don't know. Where does it say that?
I don't know exactly where. I would have to find the Makar for you.
You're getting me in my second half of my career. My first half of my career, I used to accept everything that people quoted. So now I accept nothing that people quote unless they. So you show it to me, and then you can. I can't really comment without seeing, right? But the idea of the Yetzer Hara being, the Gemara tells you the opposite, right? They took away the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah, so people no longer are running after worshiping wood and stone. Then they said, hey, this thing works. It's great. Let's do away with the Yetzer Hara for arayos, for any intimate things, right? So they said that even hens wouldn't lay any eggs because there was no mating between even the animals. So they said that was a bad thing. What we're saying here is fighting the Yetzer Hara is the idea of sublimating it, not negating it, but making it part of your arsenal, right? You fight, and it can only fight the Yetzer Hara when you're most free, when you're most in control. We ask the question, why is Pesach the time to fight your Yetzer Hara? Fighting against the Yetzer Hara doesn't mean, again, negating it, but making it part of your arsenal. It's when you're totally in control. When you're in control, you can include even things that are a little bit dangerous. If you're not in control of what's going on, electricity, fire, those are very dangerous things. But if you are able, everything is grounded, you're in control of the environment, then you can include fire or electricity in experiments, whatever you might be doing. Same thing, you're not going to use the Yetzer Hara or make it, part of your arsenal and your armament unless you are totally in control. When you're most control, Pesach, because Pesach is the time of freedom. Freedom, we said, meant what? Freedom from the inner conflict. Freedom of being totally, as much as possible, in control of who you are and what you are. So therefore, Pesach is the time to fight the Yetzer Hara. Fighting Yetzer Hara means including it as part of your growth as an individual. You're not fighting yourself, but you're using it to internalize the drives that you have, your nitiyot and inclinations to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that, in a sense, would be the best thing. You become the greatest person that you could be, right? What's the motivation to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu? To use that. Why do I need to bother? Let the I don't need to bother using. I'll ignore it. I'll fight it. The idea is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Pesach showed us a tremendous amount of love. What do we say on Shabbat? And I think that's the minhag here as well, right? What Megillah do we say Shabbat on Pesach, Chol HaMoed Pesach? And do they say it Shir HaShirim? They don't say it. Well, you should. Anyway, but before Shabbat, before every Shabbat, people say Shir HaShirim. In the Ashkenazi world, we say Shir HaShirim Shabbat Chol HaMoed. Why? Shir HaShirim is all about this love relationship between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Pesach is all about the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed to the Jewish people. We spoke about that from the time of Rosh Chodesh already. Hashem was saying, "You're now a partner with me. You're connected. We're going to be doing this together." So, what's the motivation to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Is this act of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love. On Pesach, we are remembering Hashem's love for Klal Yisrael. We thank Him for taking us out of Egypt and making us into a nation that's partnering with Him. And His love shows us, makes us feel privileged and fortunate that He chose us to serve Him, right? Through that connection, the connection is so intense on Pesach that we don't want to indulge in anything that's of self-interest. It's inconceivable. Chametz, which represents the Yetzer Hara and self-centeredness, is forbidden because the feelings of closeness and love need to be ratified, and our self-perception is altered from not focusing just on internally on ourselves. We're focusing on our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we define ourselves on Pesach through our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. After Pesach, once we have this new identity, our freedom on Pesach allows us to have a different focus and perception, allows us to recognize how much Hashem loves us. So it's a step. You're preparing before Pesach to become free and in control. Use your God-given traits, called your evil inclination, Yetzer Hara, which is called good in the Torah, to become more in control and free. Once you're free, you recognize, you know what, I'm free from all the inner conflicts, as I mentioned before. Now I can focus, look what Hashem did for me. If I'm worried about paying the bills, I'm worried about health, I can't focus on the bigger picture. Pesach is about sitting back and focus on the bigger picture. Look what Hashem has given me. Look what Hashem has done for me. We asked the question, why is Pesach the time to be engaged with the Yetzer Hara? We mentioned that now, exactly the reason why. But the whole year long, Chametz is okay. Maybe we should not have Chametz throughout the entire year. It says no, because once you have this new identity and this new perspective, we can return to Chametz, and because our self-interest we recognize is what do we want to do? We want to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We recognize that my existence is not in conflict with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's synonymous with what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to do. Now, I'll falter, I'll make mistakes, I'll do sins, whatever it might be, but the idea being is that I recognize my job here is to make, Aseh Ritzoncha Ki Ritzono, make your will Hashem's will, and Hashem will respond in that vein. Question.
Why would Hashem need to respond if you're making your will His will, and necessarily what you're doing is His will? So He doesn't have to make His will your will.
A nice question, but I think because a love relationship is not God showing us love just to get us to get to that point, right? It's like the husband who says, I'm sorry, or brings the gift only because he wants the response, that he doesn't want his wife to yell at him, or he wants his wife to be nice to him, whatever it might be. No, that's the beginning of the relationship. Hashem wants to show, I'm giving back to you.
But the fundamental question is, first the step is to make our will what He wants us to do.
Right,
so,
and Hashem tells us that because of that, I'm going to show my love back to you and making your...
And what I'm saying, it's axiomatic. If you're doing what Hashem wants you to do, necessarily, when He says, "Oh, I'm gonna do," I'm gonna make. There is no. It
doesn't have to be Torah.
Let's give examples. I'll give you examples.
No.
If somebody is what's the word? If somebody is doing focused on what Hashem wants, right? I'm on a big kick now. When you're deciding what to do about things, what would Hashem say? The guy who say what he would say. What would God say? What Hashem could, right? The fact is that we have to see. What would He really want? It's not my personal emotion is involved. If I do what Hashem wants, defined by halacha, and also the fifth Shulchan Aruch, which is using your seichel and etc., then Hashem is going to say, respond by giving me success, more money.
I understand. Maybe I'm not explaining correctly. What I'm saying is, what you're saying is, make A equal A. Right? Because you make your ratzon equal to Hashem's ratzon, right? You want to do what Hashem wants you to do. So therefore, your ratzon has to equal Hashem's ratzon, right? Because you are there. So necessarily, R would still be equal R. What I'm saying is
I understand in terms of on paper it would, but when we say Aseh Ritzoncha, I think it means when you have to decide about doing something, define it by what would Hashem want you to do, and then things that are not in the guise of Ratzon, but are Hashem's going to make His Ratzon yours. Meaning what? Meaning your Ratzon His. Meaning Hashem will do things that will be make you happy.
Okay.
Right? And that's I hear what you're saying in terms of that respect, right? Okay. So now at this point we talked about the philosophy of freedom, the philosophy of all the themes of what's the word of Pesach, but that our self-interest is really serving Hashem. How do we achieve this? And this is really the next 10, 15 minutes is going to be the conclusion. How do you achieve this concept of our self-interest is really serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Right? Negating the Chametz, fighting the Yetzer Hara, and incorporating it as part of you. And the way to do that is through what matzah is represented. What does matzah represent? Matzah represents the idea of being humble, right? Because Chametz is the famous idea of you allow Chametz to rise, it becomes puffy, it becomes expanded. That's a person's ego. Somebody once, I saw this by Rabbi Packhouse online, had this story, and as relates to being humble. He says an elderly American, not Jewish, an elderly American was at the de Gaulle airport in France, and he was fumbling for his passport at passport control. And the guy behind the counter, a very rude Frenchman, said to him, "Listen, don't you know you have to have your passport ready? What are you in? There's a big long line." He was yelling at him. So the guy says, the last time I visited France, I didn't need a passport. And the guy says, "What are you talking about? Everybody knows you need a passport. You can't get into here without a passport." He says, I can guarantee you that when my unit landed at Omaha Beach on D-Day, there were no Frenchmen standing behind the booth trying to look for my passport. So, and then the guy was a little stunned. And then he says to the Frenchman, he says like this, "Do you speak German?" And the guy says, "No, of course not." He says, "Well, you're welcome." The idea being that, when I was here last time, I saved you and all your family from the Germans, right? The guy behind the counter is a representative of a fellow who's, he has a position, he has a booth, he has some, and he thinks he's a big shot, right? So there are major obstacles to spirituality, we all know, and the biggest obstacle is this concept of arrogance. The Torah talks about se'or shebe'isa, the leaven that's in the bread. So the key factor is to recognize that this aspect of ego is what we have to put into check, right? Hashem brought us out of Egypt for what purpose? For spiritual freedom. The only thing that stands, but this is you came for the most key point. The only thing that stands between me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is what? Is me. I'm the one standing in the way. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting with open arms. I and my idiosyncrasies, I and my physical need for physical gratification, or I and my ego, who doesn't allow to admit, right? The whole concept of hisbodedut, I think, at least from what I've learned, well, I shouldn't say what I see it as one of the greatest things is negating your ego, because you're talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about yourself in real time and honestly. It's like you can't lie. You can lie to family members, wives, children, or parents. You can lie to people, business partner, or whatever. But you can't really lie to God too long without recognizing that you're a total fake. So the concept of recognizing that I'm standing between myself and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? To come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's the essence of what of life, and the opportunity at every mitzvah that we have, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, every holiday we have, is to remove that level of chametz or arrogance from us, right? Freedom means